Hello everyone, welcome to my kitchen. My name is Michael and today I'm going to share with you how to make a pie crust from scratch. This is going to be a 9-inch deep dish pie crust. Stay with me and I'll show you how this comes together. All right, so let's get started with our ingredients. I've got 1¼ cup of flour, all-purpose flour. I've got 1/4 cup of water and I've got some ice cubes in it because we want everything to be really cold. I've got 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And I've got 1 stick of butter that I'm going to take and I'm going to cut up into little quarters. And with this, I'm just going to kind of cut it into little 1/2-inch pieces. And then I'm going to take each into one of those little pieces and I'm going to cut those into little quarters. So your pieces should look like that. And I'm going to continue to work on the rest of this. So now that we've got our butter cut up into little cubes, I'm going to put this back in the freezer because mine's been sitting out for a little while as I've been prepping for this. So I'm going to put this in the freezer for about 5 minutes. I want to get this back cold again, and I'm going to put my ice water back in the refrigerator because I want that to be cold also, and then we'll work on our dry ingredients. I'll be right back. So now that I've got my butter in the freezer and my water back in the refrigerator, I'm going to go ahead and work on the dry ingredients. I've got 1¼ cups of all-purpose flour, and I've got 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and I'm just going to take a whisk. This is a cool little whisk that I've got. It's a new little gadget that I picked up, and it is a whisk, and I'll leave the link in the description box below of what it is that I've got if you're interested in it. It does really good for whisking things together. All right, now that we've got our dry ingredients whisked together, we're just going to wait on the butter now for that to sit back up in the refrigerator, get that really cold. We want the water and the butter to be really cold before we put it into our dry mixture, so I'll be right back. All right, I am back. My butter is out of the freezer now and it's gotten really cold again, so let's go ahead and incorporate that into our flour. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put that into our flour. Now we're going to take our clean hands and we're going to make sure that every piece of that butter has a little bit of flour on the outside of it. All right, now we're going to take our thumbs and our forefinger and we're just going to kind of push it like that. And we're going to make sure that that gets covered in flour. We're going to constantly keep doing that until we get all the pieces done. And then we'll cover them over with flour. And I'm going to continue to work on this and I'll show you what it looks like when we're finished with it. All right, that is where we are now with our flour and our butter mixture. You see I've got some nice sized pieces still in there. And I've got some that are pea-sized, but the bulk of it is, you know, it looks like cornmeal. That's what it is. So my house is a little bit warm today and my hands are not cold. So I'm going to pop this back in the refrigerator just for a couple of minutes just to make sure that the butter gets cold again. But if your house is a little bit cooler and your hands aren't hot, then you can definitely continue working on this. I'll be right back in just a couple of minutes. All right, I am back and I've got my flour and butter out of the refrigerator again, and I've got my ice cold water here. And this is 1/4 cup, but I'm gonna measure it out in tablespoons. And normally I can get about 5 tablespoons in it to where we want it to be. So I'm going to start out with maybe 3. And we're going to clean hands again and we're going to go right back in there. We're not going to need this because we don't want bread. We're just want to make sure that we get enough moisture into the flour that we can at least get it to stick together. That's getting pretty close. Once you can hold it together, but there's still a lot of it that's falling apart. So let's put another couple of tablespoons in there and see where we're at. All right, that's 5 now. Let's see where we're at with 5. And that is holding together really good. So I'm not going to put any more in it. I think we are where I want it to be. See, that's holding together. All right, so let me clean my hands up and I will get a seal mat here on the countertop and we will get this put together. All right, we are ready to put our dough together now. So I've got just a little bit of flour here and I've got a silicone mat down here that we're going to put the dough out on. And then we're going to pour our dough out onto it. And you're thinking, this isn't going to work, but let me tell you, it will come together. So I'm just going to take the mat, let the mat be your friend, and just kind of push it together. You can kind of turn it sideways and just kind of keep working it until it comes together. It'll all eventually come into it together. And we pull it out of the refrigerator. But I've got just a little bit of cling film here, and we're going to put that around it, and we're going to wrap it up really tightly. All right, now that I've got my dough and my cling film, it goes back in the refrigerator between 30 minutes to an hour so that it can get chilled back down again. And then we'll get it out and we'll roll it out and put it into our pie pan. So stay with me and I'll show you what happens next. All right, we are back and I've got my pie crust out of the refrigerator. I did let it sit in there for 30 minutes and then I did remove it for about 5 minutes. If you leave it in there for an hour, you might want to leave it out maybe 10 minutes. It kind of softens it up a little bit. It won't bring it completely back to room temperature, but you need a little bit of that dough warmed up a little bit so that it will roll easier when you get your rolling pin on it. So, and we're going to put some flour on our silicone mat here. Then we're going to take our pie dough, lay that out. All right, so then I'm going to take the rolling pin and I'm going to put just a little bit of flour on it. And we're going to roll this out to about 12 inches. And this little outer ring here on this mat is really nice because it will kind of shows me where that's at. So as we roll it out, we want to keep it turning. That way we kind of get an even thickness all the way around. And the dough is very forgiving. So if you see some cracks in it, you can just put those back together again and it'll come back nicely back to it. So I'm going to continue to roll this out until I get it into the shape I want, and then I'll be right back. All right, there we go. I've got my dough into the shape that I want, and I'm just going to kind of pull it up on this rolling pin here, and we're going to roll it up onto it. And then I'm going to bring my pie pan over, and we're just going to kind of roll it into it. All right, so you can see that I've got just a little bit more on this side, so we don't want to push it down into it. We want to kind of ease it into the pie pan. So we're just going to kind of ease it in. We don't want to stretch it. And just by lifting it up on the corners, you can actually just push it down into it. And at this point, you can just go around the sides and just kind of make it nice and even. If it kind of gets bunched up a little bit, you can just take your finger and just kind of go around and smooth it out. Okay, now that we've got our pie into our pie pan, if there's any hanging off the side, you can just pinch it off just a little bit, and we can actually reuse some of that if there's some holes in it that you can use it to fill in. So like I've got a little gap here, I can bring some of that in here and just pinch it right into it, and it fills it in nicely. So I'm going to go around and just kind of pull off just a little bit of this off on the outside. If you've got some kitchen scissors, you can definitely use those. Now we're going to take it and we're just going to kind of turn it up on the end so that we get a nice edge on it. And I'm going to continue to do that all the way around on the outside. I want it to be able to capture it on the sides. And then you're going to take your index. You can leave it like this if you want to. This is very, it'll cook very nicely just like this. If you want to put the little flutings on the top of it, you take your index finger and your other finger and your thumb, and you kind of push it in like that, and you just kind of go around the outside of the pie crust and just kind of push it in. All right, now that we have our pie dough and our pie pan and we've got the edges on the top of it fluted, you can see here what mine looks like now. All right, now that we've got our dough and our pie pan, we want to now blind bake this. And if you're making this, you definitely want to bake this so that it will stay into the shape that it's in. If you don't, and you try to put it into your put your filling and everything in it, it could collapse in on itself. So what we're going to do is called blind baking, and I've got just a piece of parchment paper here that I've crumbled up, just kind of make it into the shape at the bottom of this, and I'm going to put that in. We don't want to put any extra pressure on the sides of it so that we push it down. We just want to kind of make sure that we've got our parchment paper in the bottom. And then I've done the same thing to some aluminum foil, and I'm going to push that down into the parchment paper. And I have some pie weights. These are porcelain pie weights. If you don't have any pie weights, you can definitely use dry beans and you can put those in there. But I make a lot of pie dough, and so I'm going to use these pie weights, and they are just little ceramic balls like this that you can see here. And we're going to put those into the bottom of our pan. And for a deep dish pan, mine takes 2 pounds of these things. Each one of these little boxes is a pound, and I'll put the link in the description box below if you'd like to get some of those. But the deep dish shell that I've got here, pan, takes about 2 of them. And we want to kind of get those around to the side so that we get a nice covering thing. Like I say, if you don't have these, you can definitely use beans. Dry beans will do the same thing. So I'm going to put this in my preheated 425-degree oven, and I'm going to bake this for 15 minutes, and then I'll be back and show you what it looks like. All right, everyone, we are back, and I've got my pie out of the oven, my pie shell out of the oven. It's been in there for 15 minutes, and I'm just going to use the corners of the paper here and the aluminum foil to kind of use that to help me pull the pie weights out, because you don't want those flying all over the kitchen. And so what we're going to do, if you were going to be making like an apple pie or something like that, you'd be done with it. You could put your filling in it. But if you're going to be taking it a little bit further and you're going to be using this for a custard type of pie, something that's got a lot of liquid in it, we're going to do one more step to it, and I'm going to show you what to do with that. So I've taken one egg that I've beaten here, and I'm going to take this little brush and I'm going to paint the inside of it with this egg wash. I'm not going to be doing the lip of the crust because I don't want that to get any browner than what it already is. So I just want to kind of paint the walls, and this is just going to kind of put an extra little barrier between your liquids of your custard type pies against the walls of the pie dough here, and it gives a little bit of chance for it to actually continue to bake through. What you don't want is a soggy pie. At this point, we're going to take a fork and we're just going to kind of poke some holes around in it, because we don't want our pie dough to rise up off the bottom of the pan. We want it to vent. I'm going to put some on the sides. If you put the marks in it before you put the egg wash in it, you could seal up the holes, so I do this afterwards. So I've just made a few marks on the bottom. I'm going to put this back in my 425-degree oven for about 5 more minutes, and we'll let that bake through. If you don't want your top of your crust there to get any browner than what it already is until you've had an opportunity to bake your pie, you can just take a piece of aluminum foil and just cut the center out of it, and you can kind of lay that on the top of it, and that'll protect your outside of your pie, the lip of your crust there, so that it doesn't get any browner. So I'm going to put this back in the oven for 5 minutes, let my egg wash cook on the shell, and then we'll be done. All right, there we have it. We have our pie shell ready to go, and it's ready for a custard type filling. Like I say, if you're not going to be making a custard type pie with a lot of liquid in it, you don't have to do that last step in there, but that's just the extra layer that you'll put in there to make sure that your crust isn't going to be really soggy and it'll have an opportunity to cook. So I hope this has inspired you to make a pie crust. It's not a lot of ingredients in it, and maybe I've taken a little bit of that fear out of it for you. But I hope you like this content, and if you do, maybe you might want to try one of these other two over here. You might find something else you like. Again, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for watching my video. Bye-bye now.